All right, buckle up because this deep dive, oh, it's a big one. We're diving into the whole Proverbs 31 woman thing, that figure that people love to debate, even outside of like church walls.
It's true. This document you've brought in, being a Proverbs 31 woman, a timeless standard for modern times, that's quite the goal. Trying to take these ancient ideas and, I don't know, see if they work in a world of like boardrooms instead of, well, you get the idea.
Exactly, because let's be real, sometimes those verses feel like they're from a totally different planet. But before we get to all the modern takes, I'm kind of curious, historically speaking, has this whole Proverbs 31 woman thing, has it always been seen the same way?
Oh, not even close. It's really interesting how different groups throughout time have interpreted it. For ages, it was basically a checklist for like the perfect wife. Used to keep women in very specific boxes.
Yeah, I can see how that got limiting pretty quickly.
Right. And then, boom, the feminist movement comes along in the 20th century, and you have all these scholars, a lot of them women, pushing back against that narrow view. They were pointing out the strength, the leadership that's woven into the Proverbs 31 story, stuff that had been kind of ignored for centuries.
So it became less about can you bake and sew at the same time and more like, hold on, this woman was running a business empire back then. That's some serious hustle.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because now you have theologians building on what these feminist scholars were saying, and they're highlighting how those skills, the resourcefulness, leadership, all of it, those weren't just nice to haves back then. They were essential, especially in a time when women had very few rights, limited opportunities.
Wow. Yeah, it's like a testament to their resilience, not just surviving, but like thriving because they had to be resourceful.
Exactly. And that's what this source seems to be wrestling with. How do we read these ancient words and find wisdom that goes beyond just a specific time and place, right? Like the author starts with that characteristic that always seems to trip people up,
Mm.
the whole deep, unwavering faith thing.
Yeah, because the proverb itself says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Which, I mean, in our world of like Instagram filters and perfectly curated lives, that feels a little countercultural, to say the least.
It definitely makes you stop and think, right? But the source is arguing that it's not about like ignoring how you look or anything. It's about something deeper, prioritizing your spiritual life, whatever that looks like for you, and letting that be your guide, your foundation.
It's like that whole inner beauty idea, but maybe less about appearance and more about, I don't know, the strength you get from having something deeper, something more meaningful.
Exactly. It's not about fitting into some mold. It's about building that inner resilience that, like you said, shines outward. And that kind of leads into another one of those characteristics that always gets people talking.
Mm.
The Proverbs 31 woman's, shall we say, legendary ability to get things done.
Oh, yeah. She considers a field and buys it with the fruit of her hands. She plants a vineyard thing going on. Makes scrolling through social media seem kind of lame. But seriously, how does the source make that image relatable to, like, a woman today in a high-rise apartment juggling deadlines and Zoom meetings? Where's the vineyard in that picture?
That's where we got to look beyond the literal, right? The author's saying it's not about the specific to-dos, but the principles behind them, that resourcefulness, dedication, being able to not just handle a demanding life, but actually thrive in it.
So it's like that inner hustle we hear so much about, but channeled towards what matters to you, not some ancient definition of, I don't know, success.
Exactly. And that hustle, that ability to like lead and manage, it's not just about business, right? The source also talks about the Proverbs 31 woman as the heart of her family, that she watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness.
Okay, see, now that line always gets me thinking. Are we talking like 1950s sitcom homemaker here, or is there a deeper meaning to the whole leadership thing going on?
You hit the nail on the head. And the author gets that. The idea of leading a household has definitely changed. It's not about clinging to these outdated roles, but finding what's timeless about them, those core qualities.
So are we talking like creating a loving home, being there for your family? Are those leadership skills, but instead of like crops and stuff, it's about raising good humans?
You got it. It's all about that, encouraging growth, teaching them what's important, building that foundation of love and security. But here's something interesting. The source doesn't just stop at the home. You know what I mean? There's this whole other side, often overlooked, but so relevant today.
You mean how she opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy? That's, I mean, extending beyond her own family, being generous like that? That's a big deal, especially now with so many people needing help.
Exactly. The author makes this really clear connection between giving like that back then and how we show up for our communities today.
Right.
Whether it's volunteering, donating, even just being there for your neighbor, that compassion, it's part of her legacy too.
It makes me think we can get so caught up in the literal stuff, the fields, the looms, all that, that we miss the bigger point. This wasn't just about being a good wife or mom. It was about making a difference outside your own door.
Totally. And this document, it really emphasizes that impact wasn't about being perfect, but about trying, putting in the effort. There's this really beautiful part where the author talks about how the Proverbs 31 woman, she wasn't meant to be this like impossible standard, but more like a guide, a way to encourage growth in your own life, however that looks.
Okay, now that I can get behind, because who hasn't read these verses and thought, well, I guess I'm failing at life because I didn't, plant a vineyard today. But if it's about the heart behind it, the striving,
Yeah.
that's way more doable.
Right. It's about saying, okay, what speaks to me in this? How can I take these ideas and make them work for my life, my goals?
Which, honestly, that's refreshing to hear it put that way, because it leaves room for different interpretations, right? Like even the whole work-life balance thing, that's going to be different for a single parent versus someone working a corporate job or an artist, you name it.
Absolutely. And the document gets that. It encourages you to think critically, ask the tough questions about what feels universal and what might need, like a 21st century update.
So even within this one passage, there's space for different perspectives, for evolving interpretations, which is actually kind of cool when you think about it.
Totally. And that's where being able to respectfully disagree comes in, right? Even if the document doesn't spell out every single viewpoint, it definitely encourages that kind of thoughtful engagement. It's like it's asking you what feels true for you and how does that fit with your own like modern worldview.
It's about finding those pieces of wisdom that resonate with you personally, even if you don't agree with every single detail, like looking beyond the words themselves to find that deeper meaning.
Exactly. And that leads perfectly into the document's last points
Yeah.
about how we can take these timeless principles and actually live them out in our own unique ways. It's all about embracing the journey, not just focusing on the end goal.
Okay, so break it down for me. What were some of those takeaways that really stood out to you?
But the first one that really hit me was this idea of like grace over perfection. The author reminds us that none of us are perfect, and trying to be this, I don't know, flawless ideal is not only impossible, it kind of misses the point. The goal is progress, not being perfect, right?
Right.
Which, come on, in this whole hustle culture world we live in where everyone's trying to be the best at everything on social media, that's kind of a radical message. But I also think it's something we really need to hear. There's so much pressure to do it all and have it all. It's easy to forget that it's okay to just to be perfectly imperfect,
100%. And that goes right along with the document's next point. Finding that balance in the middle of all the different roles we play, all our responsibilities.
Because whether you're trying to balance a career and family or just trying to fit in some time for yourself in a world that feels like it's on fast forward all the time, finding that balance, that feeling of enough, that's important, isn't it?
It really is. And the author reminds us that we're not defined by how much we do or how well we juggle everything. It's about figuring out your priorities, setting healthy boundaries, and being okay with saying no sometimes.
And that, to me, says a lot about leadership, which we were talking about before. Because if the Proverbs 31 woman is like a model for leadership, it's not about being controlling or dominant. It's about something much quieter, much more powerful, leading with love.
Nailed it. Because true leadership, whether that's at work, at home, or just in your community, it's not about demanding perfection. It's about inspiring people, creating a space where they feel supported, valued, able to be their best selves.
And holding it all together, according to this document, is that strong foundation of faith. And not necessarily in a religious way, but faith in something bigger than yourself, whether that's spirituality, nature, even just a deep sense of purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you really feel connected to something bigger than yourself, it gives you that strength to handle whatever life throws at you, to face those challenges, with grace, with resilience. And isn't that really what this whole Proverbs 31 conversation is about? Finding that inner strength and using it to make a difference in the world.
It's funny, we started talking about how different generations have viewed these verses, but it makes me think there's something really personal about it, too. It's less about fitting some pre-made mold of the Proverbs 31 woman and more about those core values, The faith, the resourcefulness, the leadership, generosity, grace, all of it, taking those and weaving them into your own life.
Totally. And that's what I love about this document. It's not trying to give you a one-size-fits-all answer. you know?
Mm.
It's asking you to really think about it, to ask those tough questions, to figure out what a strong, meaningful life looks like for you on your own terms.
It's almost like the Proverbs 31 woman, she's not meant to be this historical figure frozen in time, but more like a mirror. Like, we look at those old verses and see parts of ourselves, our strengths, our struggles, our hopes, all of it.
Exactly. And when we see ourselves reflected in that way, it's not about judgment. It's about inspiration. It reminds us that trying to live a life of purpose, a life rooted in faith, driven by passion, defined by love and service, all of that, it's a journey. It's not about reaching some finish line. And it's a journey we're all on together.
I love that. So as we wrap this up, for anyone listening who might be thinking, okay, that's a lot, where do I even begin? What would you say is the most important thing to take away from this whole deep dive?
I think it comes down to this, the Proverbs 31 woman, even with all her amazing qualities, she's not supposed to make you feel pressured or like you're not enough. She's a symbol, an example of strength, of wisdom that speaks to women across generations, across different walks of life.
It's about embracing the journey,
Yeah.
right? Not getting caught up in some perfect ideal.
Exactly. And remembering that trying to create a life full of meaning, full of purpose, that's something worth striving for, even if we trip up along the way.
Beautifully said. And for anyone who wants to explore these ideas more, I definitely recommend checking out the full source, Being a Proverbs 31 Woman, a timeless standard for modern times. It's full of really insightful reflections, thought-provoking questions. It's bound to spark some interesting conversations. And hey, maybe even a little bit of personal growth along the way, right? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep embracing the journey.